Good evening and welcome to This Week in Northern California. I'm Thuy Vu. We have much to discuss on the national and local fronts. Joining me on the news panel are Carolyn Said, San Francisco Chronicle reporter, Jolie Odell, VentureBeat reporter, and Andrew Ross, San Francisco Chronicle columnist. Earlier this evening, President Obama signed an order triggering automatic cuts in federal spending. This is because Congress and the president failed to reach a deficit reduction deal. Andrew, let's begin with you. How is California affected specifically?
Of all the states, California is affected in dollar terms the most, something like $3 to $4 billion this year out of total, at least out of an $85 billion first year cut. The military is taking the biggest cut. California has a major military presence, mostly in Southern California, but also, of course, in Northern California, around Sacramento and around Monterey. That's going to be hit really hard too. $87 million worth at least of education cuts, which means secondary education, some primary education, plus Head Start, plus special education. There are all sorts of cuts coming through. Will it affect the overall recovery in California? I think perhaps not so much, but I think a lot of people are going to be hurt. How they get hurt, how deeply they get hurt really remains to be seen, because I think the cuts are going to be rolled out fairly slowly and carefully. This has gone, I think, from an apocalypse to a slope, and I think the administration would just as soon see it being a bunny slope.
Some specific numbers have been tossed out already, and you kind of touched on this. 1,200 teaching jobs at risk, 8,200 children will lose Head Start.
Yes.
Some of the cuts are taking effect immediately, but really, when will we feel the full brunt? Because furloughs probably won't happen for another month.
I'm not sure anybody really knows when we're going to feel the full effect, because everybody's still in the planning stage. So, for example, when I called Oakland Airport and SFO, they had no idea what they were going to do. And I think they still know, because they're waiting for the TS, for the Transportation Security Administration and the FAA to basically tell them. So the FAA is working through its plans now. All they know is that something like 40,000 FAA workers are going to be furloughed for a day or two at a time. How this plays out at local airports, we just don't know. The airports don't know yet.
Yeah.
They don't know.
Well, Andrew, are we past a point of no return, or if Washington gets its act together and reaches a budget deal, could this all just be unfurled and go back to no sequester?
And anything is possible.
It's all happening in slow-mo anyway. Nothing is really technically, no money has been taken away yet. If they reach a deal in 2 weeks, if they reach a deal in 3 weeks, would everything go back?
Anything is possible. I'm a little doubtful that that's going to happen in the short term. Maybe in the longer term, as the cuts really start to be felt a little bit more, perhaps so. But right now, it seems to me both sides are pretty firmly entrenched in their positions. And I think politically they're not going to move for a while.
So at what point will there be some kind of movement? Are they waiting to see if the public starts pointing more at President Obama or at the Democrats or the Republicans? At what point do the political maneuverings become something that will lead to a result that will avert these cuts?
Possibly. I would say probably there'll be some movement by the latest by the 2014 elections. I suspect that that's what both sides I suspect are waiting for that. I think they're waiting to see how this plays out at election time, because still the Republicans have a majority in the House of Representatives. They're very powerful in the Senate. They have a very strong set of beliefs about no more revenue, just tax cuts only. We just have to worry about the deficit. President Obama, coming off from an election victory, believes strongly that it's not going to be just about all cuts. It's going to have to be about some revenue raises as well. I think both sides are pretty firmly stuck in that position for the time being. If things get really, really bad, I mean, if air traffic is horribly disrupted or if something horrible happens, then I think probably both sides are going to have to think again.
Do you think the Obama administration was perhaps overconfident in thinking this could be averted, in that they released over the weekend a report with a breakdown for various states detailing how those states would be affected by the sequester, including California. Why did they wait so long to release that report? Wouldn't it have made more sense to release it weeks ago when the public could have said, oh, that's what's going to happen to our programs?
I don't think they had the numbers that early. I think the administration was waiting from the Office of Management and Budget. The OMB was waiting from various agencies. Everybody was trying to figure it out. I think Senator Dianne Feinstein said it best at one of the hearings, where she said something like, everybody's worried about what's going to happen, but nobody has an answer. And I think that's still true. I think that nobody really knows, except the conventional wisdom right now is it won't be an apocalypse. It maybe won't be so bad, but it's going to be bad for certain people. It's going to be bad for people, you know, who depend on rent subsidies.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard on women's, infants, and children's programs. It's going to be hard on nutrition programs. In other words, the people who can, again, perhaps afford it the least are probably, in my view, going to be hurt the most.
Let's take a bigger picture. How much of the pain is real? You said there will be certain sectors affected, but some Republicans will point out that really the amounts of money we're talking about amount to less than 2.5% of all government spending.
It's probably a little bit more than that, but that's just a percentage, and that's abstract. As I say, I think that probably a lot of people won't feel it, presumably if you're traveling, even if you're traveling business class on an airline and you're delayed for a few hours, or even if your flight is cancelled, you're going to be unhappy. If you go to Yosemite usually for a vacation with your kids, and there aren't as many park rangers and you can't go to as many places because either they're off limits or they've basically been ruined because there's so much garbage around because it hadn't been picked up, that hurts. Yeah.
Well, obviously, much more to come on this in the coming month or so. Andrew, thank you very much. Later this month, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on the question of same-sex marriage. And already this week, there's been a lot of movement as different parties filed friend of the court briefs in cases involving Proposition 8 and the Defense of Marriage Act. And Julie, some Silicon Valley companies also filed a brief. Who are they, and why are they so interested?
Well, about 287 companies signed on to the brief about DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. And these companies are from a wide range of industries, but we in the technology community saw a lot of Silicon Valley representation. We saw Google, Microsoft, Twitter, Zynga, you know, go down the line of public-facing consumer internet companies. It's like a roll call there. They're all speaking out very frankly about their support for same-sex marriage. And I think we all ask the question, well, what does any business have in such a personal political conversation? Their argument is this is also an HR conversation. It's about taxes, it's about benefits, it's about insurance, and they feel that they are shouldering an unfair burden in terms of human relations and human resources.
Specifically, though, pardon me for interrupting, specifically, though, how are they affected? Is it impeding their efforts to hire the best people? Is it creating legal confusion in the HR department? Who gets benefits, who doesn't?
All of the above. They cited one case where Yale University had to, they messed up taxes for same-sex partners 1 year when same-sex marriage was made legal somewhere but not somewhere else, and it wasn't legal federally. Then they had to charge those employees taxes, extra taxes the following year. It was confusing and it was hurtful and expensive, and a headache in terms of paperwork. So that was the argument they made as businesses. Then they made a secondary argument that was a little bit more emotional, which was, you know, it does affect our ability to hire because our values and our ethics and our mission statements are all about non-discrimination. We want to hire the best talent, whether it's gay talent or straight talent that is supportive of gay equal civil rights. And they feel the pain when, you know, a manager or an executive wants to support all his employees, but then as a professional, they have to enact DOMA. They have to live out the consequences of what they feel is a discriminatory policy.
So, Joe,
fire away.
And Jolie, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think in the Prop 8 brief, there was more of an emphasis on the competitive nature of the workforce and how everybody's after the best and the brightest. And if you exclude some of the best of the brightest for these reasons, you're going to lose out as a business.
And I think if you're excluding, I mean, we have to bring it back up again. If you're excluding LGBT people, you're excluding people who support LGBT people. And yeah, I think in California and in Silicon Valley, that's a huge issue.
Julie, do these briefs sort of show that the country has undergone a sea change in the years since Prop 8 and since DOMA, that it is now mainstream, it's acceptable for, you know, cautious political players like big corporations, like the Obama administration, to come out in support of same-sex marriage?
When you have companies like Microsoft and Goldman Sachs, like companies that aren't, you know, just the new kid on the block like Facebook or Twitter, and they're coming out and they're saying, you know, we have conservative people who work here, we have conservative customers all over the country, all over the world, and we are willing to say that we openly support the rights of our employees to marry whomever they choose. That does tell me that they're not concerned about the public relations of this, because the public relations negative effects will not be enough to harm their business bottom line. So I think that means a sea change.
And that brief was really just one in a wave of briefs filed this week. The Obama administration filed one supporting same-sex marriage. California Attorney General Kamala Harris filed one. And also there was one by a number of Republicans. And I know, Andrew, that you've reported on the same-sex marriage issue as well. Were you surprised by that brief at all, by any of the names that you saw on there?
Not entirely, because you've actually seen a number of Republicans also moving in that direction. I mean, and have moved from being opposed to civil unions, which then civil unions are okay. And then I think people started looking at the opinion polls, which have gone a sea change in the past couple of years. It's really astounding that is it something close to 60% of Americans think same-sex marriage is okay. So obviously some people are looking at polls. We have a former Republican gubernatorial candidate, Meg Whitman, signing on to one of these amicus briefs. We have her company, Hewlett-Packard, signing on.
And she supported Prop 8 as a
she supported Prop 8 as a
marriage.
candidate.
Yeah, so.
John Chambers, who is a Republican, who is the CEO of Cisco. Cisco is very much a diehard supporter of same-sex marriage, because they have very strong LGBT communities inside their workplaces.
Well, just real quickly, how much of an impact do these types of briefs have in Supreme Court cases?
You may be better than I am. I think it's debatable. The guy who drew up the Prop 8 amicus brief said he thought that the wave of business support in these amicus briefs might actually be persuasive to the court.
And I think the arguments they make about HR and law and tax, that would speak more to the Supreme Court than emotional arguments about how they feel when they have to tell someone they can't not discriminate.
This isn't just liberal California. This is business.
Yeah.
This is Goldman Sachs.
And the court is taking this up on March 26th and 26th and 27th. And so we will watch and see. Well, all right, time now for something we haven't seen much of in a while. News that Bay Area home prices are nudging upwards. Yes, you heard right, upwards. Carolyn, is this a sign of a rebound in real estate?
It is indeed. Basically, what we have here is Economics 101, basic laws of supply and demand. There's more buyers out, and they're chasing a limited pool of homes. And that is, you know, what will make prices ratchet up. And it already has been happening over the past year, and it's expected to continue happening in this coming year. So why are there more buyers? The economy is better. People are more confident about their jobs. Mortgage rates are at incredible historic lows, 3.5% for a 30-year fixed mortgage. That really increases people's purchasing power. There's a growing population whose demand, you know, has finally caught up with the supply, and there's a lot more investors out there who have deep pockets and a lot of money to spend, and they you know, of course, add to the pool of buyers. And in many cases, buying a home they could buy a home more cheaply than they can build one, you know. So,
well, where are housing prices going up the most? Is it the lower end, the higher end, the middle?
They're actually going up quite a bit by percentage-wise on the lower end, but of course it's easy to go up percentage-wise when you have a house that's $200,000. Or when the median price is $200,000, they can go up 10 or 20%. So there's different forces at work, but in all these cases, it's still the limited supply. So in the exurbs of the Bay Area, in Pittsburgh and Vallejo and Fairfield and Antioch, the places that were really, really hard hit by the housing downturn, housing prices are still half off their peaks, but they're coming up, you know, like 10% a year, because that's where those deep-pocketed investors are going to buy cheap houses that they're going to turn into rentals. That's like Wall Street's newest infatuation, is treating single-family homes as multi-unit rentals.
What about high-end homes, the $1 million plus homes? They're doing well.
They're
too,
doing great too. And but of course that's a different dynamic.
On the market for one.
So some Bay Area markets like Hillsborough, Portola Valley, the very, very elite Silicon Valley markets, and some parts of San Francisco, like Pacific Heights, they are actually above their peak values. You know, these are places where the median home price is maybe $3 million, and now it's $3.5 million. And there, of course, the reason is deep-pocketed people from the tech industry, you know, newly minted millionaires who they also have a lot of cash to spend, and they want to be near Silicon Valley or near the buses to Google or in the premier parts of San Francisco.
Is the new home construction business getting better, or are we still talking mostly about existing homes and a competition for existing homes?
At the moment, it's a little more existing homes. I mean, the Bay Area is constrained, especially San Francisco and the closer in counties, has always been there just isn't that much land to build. But new home construction is slowly ramping up, and that's hugely important for the economy, because during the downturn, 2 million construction workers nationwide lost their jobs, and those were good paying union jobs for skilled tradespeople, and most of them did not get back to work in construction jobs. So, you know, it would really make a huge economic difference if construction does start ramping up. And in other parts of the country where land is more available and cheaper, it is ramping up. And here it is a little bit, but just, you know, we're so constrained geographically.
So this is good news if you're selling, not so great if you're buying. Is it going back to the old days of multiple bids on a home and having to compete in that way?
It is, and it also is hard for people who are first-time home buyers, because maybe they're using FHA loans where they're just putting down 3.5% and they're looking at these cheaper homes, and they're having to compete with the investors who are coming in with all cash. And a seller would always take an all-cash offer, even if it's a little lower, over a financed offer. So yes, you know, you hear about bidding wars, you know, just like the bubble days, you hear about 20 offers, you hear about homes going for 20% over asking, and the realtors make that happen a little bit too. Sometimes they price homes under market specifically to incite bidding wars, and it works. You know, it draws out this feeding frenzy. So it is hard for the people looking, but on the other hand, they still have the advantage that interest rates are so low, so their effective buying power is much stronger.
Well, bottom line, if you want to sell, sell now. In the spring, when most people are looking anyway.
Yeah, and the spring is a big deal, you know, because the hope is that more people will choose to put their homes in the market, and that will help with the tight inventory situation.
All right, we'll see. Carolyn, thank you.